Do great musicians know music theory? If you've ever thought about that, I want to give you something to chew on. I want to give you a different way to think about this. Rather than asking, do they know music theory? What do they know? Let's ask, what did they do? Did they do the kind of things that you see in music theory books? Did they use those chord voicings? Did they play arpeggios? Did they play through the changes? Did they hit chord tones? That's the sort of thing we can know. We can't know what they knew, but we can know what they did. And of course, we need a concrete example. Today, we're going to be looking at John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom, and it goes something like this. Alright, so all of the chords and tabs and scales and everything is available here on Patreon for you to download as a PDF. So let's go ahead and get into it. What we're going to look at primarily is the relationship between the melody and the chords. Let's start with the melody. The melody is played out of an E minor pentatonic scale, primarily in open position. Let's go through what that is. We have open E to 3rd fret G, open A to 2nd fret B, open D to 2nd fret E, open G to 2nd fret A, open B to 3rd fret D, open E to 3rd fret G. That's our first position of the E minor pentatonic scale, and notice how I'm saying the note names. That's going to be important in a few minutes. It also moves up into a top chunk of the next position of the pentatonic. Some people think of this as the King box, the B.B. King box, or the House of Blues, because it kind of looks like a house. So what that is we move from the 2nd fret A to the B, not on the open string, but at the 4th fret of the G string. And then we continue up in this position to a 3rd fret D, a 5th fret E, a 3rd fret G, and a 5th fret A. He doesn't use that whole section, but he does move up into that House of Blues box, so we want to outline that. All right, the last piece we need to know before we look into the melody and that chord relationship is what the chords are. This song follows a pretty standard 12-bar blues form. It uses E7, A7, and B7. There is a little chord motif that happens on the E and on the A chords. We're not going to analyze that too far. If you want to play it, it's tabbed out. We're just going to think of that as E, A, and then the B chord. Okay, so to really understand the relationship between the melody and the chords here, we're not going to analyze every note of the melody, but we are going to look at one particular note. The last note of the melody. The last note of that phrase, of that motif. It's not the same every time. All right, so let's look at that melody in relationship to the chords. Let's take the first melody. This ends on an E. This 2nd fret of the D string is an E note. The chord that comes in when that happens? E. Okay, let's look at the next one. He changes the melody, but he ends on an E again. E motif. Well, 2 hardly establishes a pattern, right? Let's look at the third idea. So he goes back to the initial melody, but he ends it on the open A string instead of the 2nd fret E note. Can you guess what chord comes in when that happens? The A chord. All right. Well, what happens next? We have the second phrase, the B phrase, and again, we end on E, but that's because, guess what the next chord is? E. So hold on a second. Did he know music theory? Did he know arpeggios? Did he know chord tones? Forget that. What did he do? When he played Boom Boom, he played through the changes. He ended the melody on the note, the root note, of the upcoming chord. He sort of ushered in the sound of that chord with a note in that chord. the root note in most cases. So let's keep going. Let's see what he did. So the next phrase gets a little bit more sophisticated. That's not a B, but it is in the B7 chord, okay? So he doesn't always play the root note, but he does, or so far, has always played a note in the chord that's coming next as the last note of the melody. And then the last phrase, you guessed it, ends on E, brings us home to E. So what do we take away from this? Well, one thing is to say that John Lee Hooker played through the changes in what we would say is a traditional way to do that. He sequenced his ideas and his melodic themes and little licks and riffs to each of the chords that was happening in the 12-bar blues, the E, the A, and the B, when they happened. It's possible he didn't do this all the time. We're looking at just this 12 bars of boom boom, but he certainly could do it when he wanted to. So how do we apply this to our own playing? What do we really take away from this besides seeing what he did? Well, we now have a concrete way to move our own ideas through the form of a 12-bar blues. Rather than playing lick after lick that are unconnected, let's take one idea and let's sequence it through the three chords, the E, the A, and the B of the 12-bar blues, by changing the landing note to usher in this chord that's coming, whether it's the home chord of E, or we're going to the A, or we're going to the B chord. Let's sequence our melody to those chords as they come so that it feels like we're really playing music. We're moving with the progression of the 12-bar blues. We're not just noodling. So here's how you do this. You think of a lick, any old lick. It's got to be in the same scale context, key context as boom boom, so that we can have it fit to each of the chords, but it could be anything. Here's one that I thought of. Pretty simple little blues lick. It's G, E, D, B, D, E. Right on the top two strings of the E minor pentatonic open position. Now let's sequence it, right? You may not be able to do this on the fly, so you got to figure it out before you go to play with the backing track. Right now I'm ending on E. We got to find an A to end on. There's an A on the second fret of the G string. So I'm going to now move my idea, or change my idea, so that it ends on the A. So instead of this, I'm going to change those last two notes to lead down to A. Now you'll notice I added a note here. This is a B flat. That's commonly called the blues note. You may have seen that before. He doesn't really use that. He slides through it, but it's a very common addition to a 12-bar blues. So we're going to go ahead and add it. So we have this. And that takes us to the A chord. The other chord we need to get to is the B chord. There's a B on the open second string, so we're going to go to that note. And it kind of sounds like that chord is coming. So this solo, my new solo, my version of John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom, is tabbed out. You'll have access to it. It sounds something like this. Cool, right? Not so bad. Not so bad for taking something from one of these old masters and applying it to what we can do and what we can learn, right? All right, so let's review. Let's go over what we talked about, what you want to take away from this, and what you're going to do for practice. So to review, we threw all that, what do they know, out the window. We don't know what they knew in a lot of cases. All we can look at is what they did. In John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom, he played through the changes. He hit root notes or chord tones of the chords as they came by in the 12-bar blues format. What do we do with this? How do we incorporate that into our own playing? Well, we make up our own idea and we sequence it through the blues form in a similar way. Now, how do we practice this? Well, you can play my own solo, or there's a backing track which has space in it for you to play your own solo, make one up, sequence it through the blues, and jam along to your own version of John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom with your own melody moving through the chord tones. Make this your own. Take these ideas and use them to create your own solo melody idea and sequence it through the chord changes just like he did. If you can do that, you're playing the blues. All right, so before we wrap up, I want to give you a little caveat with this. There are two sides to learning something like this. There's a big picture and a little picture. The big picture we haven't really discussed. The big picture is you can make any idea fit over any chord if you tie it into a chord with a chord tone or something like that. So if you like to play jazz, you like to play over a 2-5-1, think of one melody, just like we did for the blues, and tie it into the chords in a 2-5-1. This idea is applicable in a lot of ways outside of the 12-bar blues that we played it in. But the little picture, the focus, we have to have something concrete. You can't learn anything if you're spread too thin. So your one goal this week is to do this one idea in this one key, in this one backing track, in this one blues with just this one chord change, right? See, we can't do everything all at once, but we can do one thing. So that's your homework. See if you can make up your own idea, play it through the 12-bar blues like John Lee Hooker, jam along to the backing track, and have a good time. I'll see you next week. Thanks.